This tutorial explains the validation code field in the context of creating field definitions within SPXA. You need to understand the basics of multi-value databases in order to best utilize this tutorial. If you create a field within SPXA, you must define it. Aside from all of the other information you might use to define your field, you can define a validation code. The validation code field allows you to check users' input in order to maintain data integrity. Generally, a validation code returns an error message if a user makes an invalid entry. Certain validation happens automatically in relation to the type of field. Numeric fields and monetary fields only accept numbers, and date fields also have built-in validation. For an example of a validation code, we can look at the fictitious car rental system shipped as a demo account in SPXA. The Hire Details screen allows customers to schedule a car rental. There are fields to specify from which date you are renting the vehicle and on which date you are returning it. Of course, you can't return a rental car earlier than the date on which you pick it up. So if a customer entered a date in the ToDate field that is earlier than the date in the FromDate field, that would be invalid data. We can use a validation code to prevent such invalid data entry. To see what is happening behind the scenes, we can look at the screen definition and field definition. First, we should point out that the FromDate field has a default value of today's date. This has relevance to the validation code for the ToDate field. You see first that there is a default value for this field. By default, the ToDate value is 1 day beyond today's date, which is stored in @date. But you can change this date, and when you change this date, your input will be subject to the validation code for the ToDate field. Again, we wanted to make sure that you can't enter a value the same as or earlier than the value in the FromDate field. So, our validation code says that there is an error if the ToDate field value is less than or equal to the value in the FromDate field, and in that case, we deliver the error message, "Date cannot be less than FromDate." Let's see that in action. When we enter a ToDate that precedes the FromDate, we see the error message specified in our validation code. You can place multiple validation expressions in your field definition, separated either by AND or OR, but you cannot combine AND and OR. For such complex validations, use a paragraph. Also note that the validation code you place on a field applies only when the field is placed on an entry screen. It is not applied during batch updates and does not apply if the field is never prompted.